Hey, excuse me. You're in the way. David said the front row is reserved for family, people who actually cared about his mother. You can find a seat in the back if there's space left for you.
The whisper was sharp enough to carry across 3 rows. Grace looked at her. Calm. Still. Then stepped aside without a word and watched as the woman David had brought to replace her settled into the seat Grace had occupied for 6 years. Sakina thought she was claiming the upper hand. She had no idea she was stepping into the center of a case Grace had been building for 7 months. She wanted the front row. Grace let her have it. From the 3rd row, she had a perfect view of the moment David's world, and Sakina's designer lifestyle collapsed completely. Before we go deeper, like this video, subscribe to her drama tales, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from today. Now let us get back into the story. To understand what Grace had built, you need to understand what she had been doing for the 2 years before. Patricia, David's mother, had been sick for a long time. The kind of illness that arrives slowly then takes everything at once. The kind that reveals who stays and who finds reasons to disappear. David disappeared. Grace stayed. She drove Patricia to chemotherapy every Thursday for 14 months. Sat in the waiting room for, sometimes 5 hours. Brought food in containers she prepared the night before because hospital meals made Patricia sick, and Grace had spent the first month learning exactly what her body could handle. She memorized the medication schedule. Not the simplified version. The full one. Every interaction, every timing, every dietary conflict. She studied the documentation until she understood it completely because Patricia's comfort depended on precision, and Grace was not the kind of woman who did things halfway. She changed the sheets when Patricia could no longer manage.
Thank you, Grace.
She called the doctor twice when she noticed shifts in Patricia's condition before anyone else saw them. Both calls made a difference. Patricia saw all of it. In the 2nd year, when her hands shook too much to manage online banking, Patricia did something David never questioned and never understood. She added Grace as secondary signatory on her accounts and named her executor of the estate. "I trust you more than my own son," Patricia said plainly. "Not cruelty. Accuracy. He does not pay attention. You do. I need someone who pays attention." Grace took the responsibility seriously. She tracked every transaction, every payment in, every expense out, which meant when David started redirecting money from his mother's accounts, quietly, gradually, the way people do when they believe nobody is watching, Grace saw it. She saw the first transaction in spring. A restaurant in a city David claimed was a work trip. She checked the dates. It was not work. 3 weeks later, a hotel booking appeared. Then flights. Then purchases from a boutique Grace had never heard David mention, and that matched nothing he had ever bought for himself. She did not confront him. She documented. She opened a folder on her laptop and began building what would become the most important document in the case. A line-item record of every cent of Patricia's estate David had redirected. The holidays. The dinners. The designer bag she would later see on Sakina's arm at the funeral. Every transaction flagged. Every date logged. Every amount verified against statements she had full legal access to as executor. 7 months of documentation before the funeral. She also did something else in that period. 6 months earlier, David asked her to handle some household administration. Accounts, paperwork, the mortgage. He was busy. He trusted her. He signed what she placed in front of him without reading because he never read what she placed in front of him. This time what he signed gave Grace the mechanism she needed. She consulted her lawyer first. Made sure every step was correct and documented. Then, using her legal authority and the inheritance her father left her, money David never paid close enough attention to know the full extent of, she bought out David's equity in the house. He thought he was signing household updates. He was signing away his right to the front door. By the morning of Patricia's funeral, Grace was no longer David's wife in any meaningful sense. She was his landlord, and she was about to terminate his lease. The night before the funeral, Grace worked until midnight. The program needed finishing. The caterer needed confirmation. The florist needed a callback. The pastor needed the correct spelling of Patricia's middle name. David was asleep by 9. Grace sat at the kitchen table and worked through every item. When finished, she looked at the printed program. Cream paper. White flower border. A photograph of Patricia laughing at something off camera, her whole face lit with joy. Grace had gone through 4 boxes of old photographs to find it. She knew the moment she saw it that it was the one Patricia would have chosen. Patricia's name in clean letters at the top. Grace's name nowhere. She stacked the programs, packed them in a box, went to bed. Lay in the dark next to David. He was snoring. He had come home smelling of a perfume that was not hers, eaten the food she made, gone to sleep. Grace stared at the ceiling. She had found the first message 7 months ago. A Sunday afternoon in March. David's phone on the kitchen counter. A name she did not recognize lighting up the screen. She read it. She understood immediately. She did not confront him. She went quiet inside. Kept showing up for Patricia because Patricia had nothing to do with what David was doing. And that same evening she opened her laptop and created a folder. She was up at 5. Showered. Dressed. Coffee made before the sun rose. Simple black dress. Wedding ring worn from habit more than feeling. Flowers confirmed. Catering confirmed. Programs packed. Burial handled. Seating done. Music sent to the organist 2 days ago. Eulogy written by Grace, given to David to read. She heard him upstairs. Shower. Wardrobe. Suit coming off the hanger. He came down looking perfect. The suit fit. The pearl brooch caught light at his lapel. Patricia's brooch, the one Patricia asked Grace to pin on him 3 weeks before she died, because she knew her son would never think to do it himself. He had not asked what it was. Is everything ready? He said. Yes. He nodded. Drank his coffee. Looked at his phone. Grace picked up the programs and walked to the car. They drove to the church in silence. The service began. The pastor spoke about Patricia's warmth. Her faith. The way she made everyone who entered her home feel expected. The congregation nodded. Some cried softly. The organ played a hymn Patricia loved. David sat in the front row. Sakina beside him. He placed his hand over hers when the pastor spoke about loss. When the eulogy came, David walked to the podium. Unfolded the paper Grace had typed. Read the words Grace had written. The biography. The garden. The laugh. The way Patricia raised David with little and gave him everything. Then he came to the line Grace had spent 45 minutes perfecting. My mother once told me, on a Thursday afternoon in her kitchen, that the truest form of love is showing up even when it is hard. She said it while peeling apples for a pie she was too tired to bake. She said it to the only person in this room who was there with her that afternoon. David read it smoothly. He had no idea what he was reading. Patricia said those words to Grace. On a Thursday. The Thursday Grace drove her home from chemotherapy and finished peeling the apples when Patricia's hands began shaking. David had never been in that kitchen on a Thursday. He did not know which apples. Which conversation. He was never there. He delivered Grace's most private memory with Patricia while holding Sakina's hand. Grace sat in the third row feeling the weight of invisibility settle into her chest. Not grief. Not anger. The settled heaviness of a woman who had been carrying something for years and had finally decided today was the last day. She was not done yet. Patricia had made sure of that. But the funeral was only the first part of Patricia's final plan. The reception hall filled quickly. Grace had arranged it. Long tables in white cloth. Food she had coordinated over 2 evenings. A table near the entrance with framed photographs of Patricia arranged in order from childhood to her last good days. David stood near the entrance with Sakina. Charming. Shaking hands. Receiving condolences with practiced grief. Introducing Sakina. A close friend. She has been a great support. Someone dear to me. She wanted to pay respects. Sakina was beginning to notice things. The older women stopping conversations when she walked past. Aunt Louise refusing to speak a single word to her since the church. For introductions and not one warm response. She noticed she was wearing pearls. David had pressed them into her hand. Were these? They will look right, and she had put them on without asking whose they were. She was thinking about that now. At the far end of the hall, near the window, sat Mrs. Higgins. 71. Patricia's closest friend for 4 decades. Small. White-haired. Dark eyes that had never needed help seeing through anything. She was holding a cup of cold tea and watching David with the expression of a woman who has lived long enough to recognize exactly what she is looking at. Grace sat beside her. She would have been heartbroken, Mrs. Higgins said quietly. Still watching David. Not because of the girl. Patricia knew David had weaknesses. She had been heartbroken about that for years. A pause. She would have been heartbroken because of what he is doing to you. In public. On this day. I know. She talked about you constantly those last months. More than she talked about David. She said you were the kind of woman who holds the roof up and never asks anyone to notice. Grace looked at her hands. She asked me to do something months ago when she could still have a proper conversation. She said, "Margaret, if David makes a fool of himself at my funeral, stand up and say something." She knew her son. She knew you. Mrs. Higgins turned to look at Grace directly. She left me the words. Wrote them herself. Made me promise. Grace was quiet. Then, "You should do what you promised." Mrs. Higgins set down her tea. Straightened her back. "I intend to." 15 minutes later, Mrs. Higgins walked to the microphone. She tapped it once. The sound cut across the room. Silence fell the way it does when something real is approaching. David looked up. Relaxed slightly. He assumed something brief and warm. He was wrong. "My name is Margaret Higgins. Patricia was my closest friend for 40 years. I was with her at the end. I am here to make sure her final chapter is understood correctly by every person in this room." A fork touched a plate somewhere. No one else moved. Patricia cared about dignity, about honesty, about loyalty. In her final months, she cared most about the woman doing everything for her. She looked at Grace. "Grace, stand where everyone can see you." Grace stood, stepped from the wall. This woman planned this entire day. Every flower, every photograph. The program in your hands, designed, written, printed by Grace. She wrote the biography, chose the music, coordinated with the pastor, confirmed the burial. A pause. She drove Patricia to chemotherapy every Thursday for 14 months. For 5 hours in that waiting room every week. Brought food in containers because hospital meals made Patricia sick and Grace learned exactly what she could eat. Aunt Louise made a sound. Confirmation. She changed the sheets. Learned the full medication schedule. Called the doctor twice when she noticed something wrong before anyone else saw it. Both times it made a difference. Mrs. Higgins looked at the paper in her hand. Then up. "Patricia wrote these words 4 months ago. Made me promise to read them if her son forgot himself." The hall held its breath. Grace came into this family as a wife, but stayed as something greater. She stayed as a daughter, a nurse, a friend, a witness. She saw me at my worst and never made me feel small. She held my hand in the dark when I was afraid. She told me I was still beautiful when I no longer believed it. She is the best thing that came into this family, and I am afraid my son does not know what he has. I am afraid he will only understand her value when she is gone. If you are hearing these words, then I was right. I want the record clear. I want every person in this room to know what Grace did, because Grace will never say it herself. Mrs. Higgins folded the paper. She looked at the front row. "A woman who nursed your mother for 2 years sat in the 3rd row today. Her seat was given to someone else. Someone who has not spent a single day in this family's service. Someone wearing a brooch she did not earn the right to wear." She did not say Sakina's name. Every head turned at once. Sakina felt the weight land on her physically. Her hand moved to the brooch. She reached for David's arm. He stepped away without looking at her. The murmuring broke open. Controlled. David's uncle leaned toward his cousin. Aunt Louise stood, held David in a long look, walked to Grace's side of the room. Mrs. Adeline began clapping. Slow. Measured. Others joined. The sound moved across the hall. Not celebration, acknowledgement. A room refusing to pretend. David searched for somewhere to rest his eyes. Found nothing friendly. He turned for Grace. She was already moving. She picked up her purse. Smoothed her dress once. Looked at Mrs. Higgins. One nod. Mrs. Higgins nodded back. Grace walked to the door. Grace. David's voice came sharp across the room. Wait. We need to talk. She stopped. Turned. She looked at him the way you look at something you have carried for years, and finally sat down. I organized this day so your mother could leave with dignity. I did it because I loved her. Because she deserved it. Because someone had to. She held his gaze. I have spent 6 years being the one who does everything and being treated like I do not matter. I am done being both. She looked at Sakina. I hope you are ready. This family runs on the work of the woman you just told to find a seat in the back. A pause. Keep the receipt for those pearls. The estate lawyer will be calling tomorrow morning. They were never David's to give. Sakina's hand pressed flat against the brooch. Grace walked through the door. It closed with a soft final sound. Aunt Louise said, loud enough for everyone. She is the only one in this family who ever behaved like family. No one disagreed. David did not follow her. Sakina stood beside him 20 minutes before saying she needed air. She did not come back. He found her in the car park. Engine running. Pearl brooch on the dashboard. That was humiliating, she said. Cold. Precise. You told me this would be fine. I did not expect. You did not expect. She looked at him. She organized that day. Wrote the words you read. Sat in the third row while you gave me her seat and her mother-in-law's jewelry. Now there is a lawyer calling about pearls. He had no answer. How much of your life was actually hers, David? Silence. Do not call me. She reversed out. The brooch stayed on the dashboard. 48 hours later, a registered envelope arrived. David opened it at the kitchen table where Grace had finished the funeral program at midnight. 3 documents. The first, divorce petition. The second, formal notice to vacate backed by certified copy of the new deed. Grace's name alone as legal owner. 30 days to pack the life he thought he owned. The third, an invoice. A line-item breakdown of every cent of Patricia's estate David had redirected toward Sakina. Holidays. Dinners. Boutique purchases. Weekend bookings. Each entry dated. Each amount exact. Each transaction verified against statements Grace had managed as executor for 2 years. Grace had not been grieving. She had been auditing. Every gift David gave Sakina, documented, flagged, legally presented as a debt to Patricia's estate with David's own signatures acknowledging liability. He had signed those forms without reading. He always did. He trusted Grace to handle the details. She handled every single one. He sat at the table a long time. Called Grace. 1 ring. Voicemail. Called the lawyer's number on the petition. Someone would be in touch within 5 business days. 5 business days. He put the phone down. He looked at the kitchen. Cupboards Grace organized. Refrigerator where supplements had expired because no one checked. Counter where she made coffee every morning for 6 years. He had been standing on a floor Grace built. He never looked down. Now the floor was gone. The weeks after were quiet in the way only emptiness is quiet. Sakina never called. He saw her 6 weeks later at a shop. She was with a friend. Looked well. Said hello briefly and moved on. He understood from that exchange she had closed the chapter completely. She came for a ready-made life. Found a debt-heavy house, a family that could no longer look at him, a lawyer's letter about a pearl brooch. Not what she signed up for. David moved to a 1-bedroom apartment. Rent higher than expected, because he had never paid attention to what things cost. Grace handled that. His salary smaller than he remembered, because for years he spent as though Grace's income and management were invisible extensions of his own. They were not. They were gone. He kept the funeral program. He did not know why. He kept it on the side table. Sometimes in the evenings he looked at Patricia's photograph, the one where she was laughing, the one Grace found after 4 boxes, and read the closing line of the eulogy Grace had written. She taught us that love is not what you say. It is what you do every day without being asked. He sat with that longer each time. Grace's apartment faced east. Morning light came early. She placed her reading chair by the window in the first week after learning the path the light took. That was the kind of thing she did. Paid attention. Adjusted. Made the space work. She loved the apartment. No history except what she put there. No silences carrying weight. No one to manage or perform for. She was working properly again. With full energy. She had forgotten how good she was. Or maybe had not had room to remember. Now she remembered. Rachel came on Saturdays. They ate at the table near the window and talked for hours. Better than when they were 19. Less to figure out. More to enjoy. One Saturday Rachel asked, "Do you miss any of it?" Grace thought carefully. "I miss Patricia. I miss who I believed David was at the beginning. I miss the idea of what I thought I was building." She looked at her tea. "I do not miss the reality. I do not miss being invisible in my own home." "No." Patricia knew, Grace said. She saw it all and made sure, even from the end, that the truth was spoken in a room full of people before I walked away. She could not fix what David broke. She made sure nobody misunderstood what happened. Outside the city settled into evening. Buildings lit softly against darkening sky. Grace sipped her tea. Exactly right. She had not cried at the funeral. She had been grieving that marriage for years before the day arrived. The funeral was just when everyone else caught up. The lesson today is not just about respect. It is about visibility. Financial visibility. Grace did not win because she was patient or kind or devoted, though she was all of those. She won because she paid attention to details David decided were beneath his notice. The accounts. The transactions. The documents he signed without reading. The paperwork he handed her because he trusted her to handle it and never once followed up to understand what handling it meant. That inattention cost him everything. His house, his mother's estate, the lifestyle he ran on money that was never his. All of it unraveled not because Grace was clever, though she was, but because David spent years assuming someone else's competence was background noise. He never asked where it came from, never asked what it cost, just assumed it would always be there. In any partnership, marriage, business, family, knowing the books is as important as knowing the person. Grace knew both. David knew neither. Patricia understood this. That is why she gave Grace the keys and not her son. Not cruelty. Accuracy. She knew who was paying attention. The warning is simple. The person who stops reading paperwork is the person who finds their name no longer on the deed. The person who never stops paying attention decides whose name goes there instead. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to reclaim something legally yours from someone who assumed they could take it? Have you been the one in a partnership who knew the accounts, tracked the details, held the records, while everyone assumed it ran itself? Or have you had a Mrs. Higgins moment? Someone who stood up in a room full of people and made sure the truth was heard? Tell us in the comments. We read every one, and your story matters here. If this resonated, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs reminding that knowing your own paperwork is not just smart, it is protection. If you have not subscribed to her drama tales, do it now. Keep your head high and your records clean. We will see you in the next drama.